Good morning, everyone. My name is Trevor Dyck. I'm a product manager at Amazon. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about product management, also just tell you a little bit about Amazon. I'm sure you're a little bit interested in Amazon and how it works. A little bit of a different company, a little bit peculiar, we like to say, compared to other companies out there. So we have some different ways of doing things, and that kind of pervades how we do product management as well. So I'll talk a bit about that. Amazon, I think most of you know, fairly big company, a lot of different brands. I happen to work in Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud division of Amazon. Been there for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was with a variety of companies, Zugma, where I worked with Andrew. I was at HP, where I started out in product management, Hewlett-Packard, Agilent, which was a spin-out, startup here in town called Colligo Networks, which builds collaboration software, and then most recently Amazon. So I did undergrad up here in engineering on the hill here, and then I did MBA at the downtown campus. AWS is a cloud computing platform. Basically, it's IT infrastructure that we host for other people. So we run people's IT infrastructure. Some of the customers range from startups to very successful startups like Netflix and Airbnb, enterprise companies, government. FINRA is an example. FINRA is the biggest US financial regulator. So we do have a lot of enterprise and government type of customers on our platform. Kellogg's is a customer. Supercell, if any of you play video games, maybe Boom Beach or Clash of Clans, they're customers. So that whole video game runs on our platform. Similarly with Netflix, every movie you watch is being streamed from Amazon Web Services. We have more than 1 million customers active every month in 190 countries, so it's a fairly large customer base. And the company or the division within Amazon has been in existence for about 10 years. I'll tell you a little bit later how it kind of got started. It's kind of an interesting story. We were actually the first enterprise IT vendor to reach a $10 billion run rate. When we say run rate, basically that's quarterly revenue times 4. And our most recent quarter, we just announced our quarterly earnings were $3.5 billion in revenue. We're still growing at a really rapid pace. 47% growth year over year is the most recent numbers. So that's a bit about Amazon. Let's talk a bit about product management. It does vary a little from company to company, but some things are fairly similar. So at Amazon, product managers are responsible for developing inspired product visions. So we work with teams that develop and actually write the products. And in my case, it's a lot of software development, user experience developers. What we do is we set the vision, and we do that from identifying what the customer's needs are. So it's really important for us to really talk to customers and be involved with customers on a daily basis and understand really what it is they need from Amazon. So we look at also market opportunities, technology trends, and really kind of marrying all those things together to create that differentiated product strategy. We define customer experiences in the form of features and functions that drive the product roadmap. So when we launch a product, obviously we have to define what that product is, what the features are, how it's going to look, especially for web products or online products or mobile products, all those things. The look of the product is very important. We work with user experience designers on that piece of it. And really we drive that roadmap to meet the vision. So you have a vision, it might be a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year vision, and you're progressively working towards achieving that vision through your product roadmap. Another important aspect is after we've launched the product and when it's in the market, we really need to identify and measure product and business metrics. And it's one thing I found being at Amazon is Amazon's very obsessed about data and metrics. We really obsess about how the product's doing in the market, how many users we have, what our conversion rates are, how much revenue we're making, what our profit is. All those things are metrics that we pay really close attention to. And that helps us just tune the product and make it more successful and hit the growth targets that we need. Most importantly, we're the voice of the customer. So engineers and developers are often they're sitting behind their computer cranking out code. We need to be there to be that voice of the customer so that they understand what it is we're building, why we're building it, and who it's for. And that's probably the most important aspect of being a product manager. And at Amazon, this has particular importance. This is a quote from Jeff Bezos. The thing that's very ingrained inside Amazon is what we call customer obsession. So at Amazon, we're customer obsessed. We're not competitor obsessed. We start with the customer's needs and we work backwards. I'll talk more about working backwards and what that means. What does this picture mean? Well, we talk about the concept of the empty chair. So when we have a meeting, there's an empty chair, and that empty chair is the most important person in the room because we imagine the customer is sitting in that chair. So at every decision we make, everything we do, everything we talk about, we think about what's the impact to that customer. So that's a really unique thing, I think, about Amazon. A lot of companies talk about customer centricity, Probably every company I've worked on, it's posted on a wall somewhere or on a poster. But at Amazon, it really is ingrained in the culture, and I think it drives a lot of things. So it's actually one of Amazon's 14 leadership principles. The leadership principles are just really a set of principles that drive behavior at Amazon. And while they're called leadership principles, they don't just apply to managers or leaders, they apply to everyone. We consider everyone in the company to be a leader, whether you're working in a warehouse stocking shelves or whether you're executive, a CEO of the company. So I'm not going to talk about all of these. You can go online and read about some of these, but I'm going to highlight a few of them. We talked about customer obsession. We start with the customer and we work backwards from what they need. If any of you have worked in a technology company, you'll know that technical people, engineers, often start with the technology and then try to make it fit, try to sell it to somebody, try to figure out how someone can use it. We start the other way around. We start with what did the customer need, work backwards and figure out what technology can solve that problem. So that's really important in product management and really important aspect of customer obsession. Invent and simplify. So we require a lot of innovation. We try to find ways to simplify problems, to make it easier for customers, to actually make it easier for ourselves internally to develop things or to manage things. Always inventing and simplifying is really important. Probably you've seen Amazon creating all kinds of things. Some of them are good, some of them aren't, some of them fail. Jeff Bezos likes to say that invention and failure are inseparable twins. So it's important to always, when you're innovating, you're going to have failures, but if you're not having failures, you're not innovating enough. So that's a really important principle that we adhere to. One that always gets a lot of interest is the right a lot, because people join the company and they read this and go, well, how do I be right a lot? How do I get better at that? And what that really means is listening. It's a lot of listening to people and actually be willing to change your mind. So what I've noticed about people that are right a lot is they are willing to change their mind, they're willing to listen, they're willing to challenge their most deeply held convictions about things and actually change their mind, and that makes them right more because they're adapting and they're changing. The world's a changing place. Things aren't static. Things you may have believed in the past might change in the future. So it's important to always be looking. You might see new data that changes your mind, or maybe you just look at a problem a different way. So that's a really important aspect of Amazon culture as well. Think big. Again, when we hire product managers, we really look at this think big, because you're not going to really create amazing products by thinking small. You've got to think really big, really globally. Just thinking big about what big problems can you solve, and not be afraid to challenge some of the ways of doing things out there today. Have a backbone, disagree and commit. So number 13 there. So that's an interesting one too. The culture in Amazon is one where disagreement is not something that's shunned. In many companies there's a sort of, if you've worked in a company, there's often this false consensus that develops where people are in a room and people think they agree, but actually everyone's just kind of going along with what others think. The important principle here is that whether you're a product manager or anyone, that if you believe something different or you have data that shows something different, you're willing to challenge. And we have some actually pretty heated arguments in Amazon and meeting rooms about things. But at the end of it, we commit. We disagree, but we agree to disagree, and then when we've made a decision, we commit and we move forward. And there's no going back and saying, well, I didn't agree with that. We try to stay on the plan and move forward with what we've decided. So product managers are responsible for definition, development, and launch of products, basically. Things I'm sure you've been talking about in your class. What we're measured on usage and adoption metrics. So how many customers are using our products, how much usage they're getting. Adoption is essentially the same thing, how many customers are adopting the product. We're also accountable for the P&L, so the profit and loss statements. So for the products that we manage, we manage the P&L. We have finance teams that create that for us, but we're responsible for managing it, driving it, understanding what the underlying factors are that drive P&L, and managing those. So that's a very important aspect of product management at Amazon. In terms of hiring, if you're ever looking to be a product manager in Amazon, so it says preference given to engineering and computer science. That's probably more for the Amazon Web Services side of things, because it's such a technical product area. In many of our retail businesses, like in Kindle or Amazon.com or Prime or any of those type of teams, you could be a product manager with probably a business degree, maybe an MBA. And we do hire MBA grads directly into PM roles. Even with no experience, they can jump right into a product management role. We work most closely with customers. Engineering, sales, and marketing are the departments we work most closely with, but customers is, I think, the most important of those. Within engineering, there's also, I mentioned, user experience. So we work with UX people that really help. They're an important part of product definition because they're defining what that experience is of that product And most product managers have a little bit of understanding of that, but UX people are experts at figuring out what the UI should look like, what the experience should be for the end customer. So those are really important people for us to collaborate with. And of course, we're guided by the leadership principles. So Amazon as a whole is a very, what we call, flat organization, not very hierarchical. There's a concept of, I'll talk about two pizza teams in a minute, but so product management, there's no central product management for Amazon. It's actually within each business group or business unit or product team. And we have this concept of two pizza teams. When you're trying to solve big problems or build big things, organization and communication is really hard. So this concept is we try to divide teams or products into smaller teams. So maybe 10 to 12 people is typical. So most product teams would have kind of that range of people. I mean, there's exceptions, but that's what we aim for. So the idea is, yeah, you can feed a team with just two pizzas. And this is a Jeff Bezos thing, and it's really kind of pervaded the company. And the reason I mention that is because often product managers are part of a single two pizza team or maybe two teams. Right now I'm working with two teams. It was actually three, but we just hired somebody. So we try to keep it to one or two teams. That allows you to sort of really embed with the team and work closely and have very close communication. It does work really well. I mean, if you think about how humans, how we grew up around campfires, and if you're ever at a dinner table, the dinner tables are usually maximum of 8 to 10 people. That's a natural kind of size of a group to communicate well. So it does work really well, and that's kind of how product management is structured within the company as well. Working backwards, I've mentioned this a few times, so everything starts with the customer and then we start with the end and work backwards instead of starting with the technology and working forwards. If we don't have the data, we try to get it. So we do a lot of work on collecting data. As product managers, we talk to a lot of customers just anecdotally. We do a lot of surveys. We do a lot of market analysis to just get the data we need to figure out what it is we're trying to do, what we're trying to build, how to make the product successful, how to make the customer more successful. And in terms of organization as well, we don't typically have people reporting to us. There are some exceptions. Sometimes PMs will have a few other PMs reporting into them, but mostly PMs are fairly independent, working with a team and reporting into a general manager or a business unit manager. I was going to say this at the beginning, I'm using PowerPoint here, but PowerPoint actually in Amazon is something that's pretty much banned. We don't use PowerPoint in Amazon. We do use it for, PowerPoint's good for slideshows. It's not good for meetings or conveying ideas. And every other company I've worked at PowerPoint is pervasive and you use it a lot. The problem with PowerPoint is it glosses over things. It's, there's bullets, there's not full sentences. So in Amazon, for a lot of the work we do and a lot of the things I'm talking about today, we do what we call narratives. Narratives are 1 to 6 pages. They're memos essentially, but they're written English prose. They're text. Typically no diagrams, no tables, no bullets. They're text. And max 6 pages. No document can ever be more than 6 pages. So if you ever join Amazon, and people are surprised when they join Amazon, they find this because you go in a meeting and there might be 10 or 12 people in the meeting, and what we do is someone doesn't get up and present like I'm doing here. We hand out the document we're going to discuss, and everyone sits quietly for 20, 30 minutes, and we have basically like a study session. We read it, and then at the end, we talk about it. And it's amazing how well it works because the amount of information that can be conveyed in a document like that is just so much more than someone's going to be able to convey by presenting something on a slide deck. So one of those narratives that we produce as product managers is what's called a PR FAQ. It's a press release and a frequently asked questions. So this is really how we define a new product. So let's say someone has an idea for a product, and it can be anybody actually. I mean, product managers lead this, but anyone in the company can come up with an idea, write a press release, write a FAQ, and have it reviewed, and it might become a product. The press release is really what describes the new product. It has a heading, product name, summary of what the product is, the problem it solves, how it solves a problem, and a call to action. So just like any press release you would read announcing a product. So it's part of working backwards. We're starting at the end and we're saying, when we announce this, what are people going to read? What are they going to understand about the product? And it really helps crystallize what the benefit is of the product to the customer, who it's for, what it's going to do differently from what other products have done, and the call to action. So what should they do to actually start using it? And then the other part is a FAQ, frequently asked questions, that accompanies the PR, addresses any questions customers may ask. So, for example, Amazon Web Services was started, it's a $10 billion, or actually $13 billion company, and it was started by one PRFAQ, a 6-page memo. So Andy Jassy, who's the CEO of AWS, wrote that PRFAQ. He wrote a document and he proposed it, and Jeff Bezos read it and approved it, and that started AWS, and that became this huge company. Other things like drone delivery. Drone delivery was started by somebody writing a PRFAQ, iterating on it. It's not just like thing you write once and then hand it to somebody. It's often like iteration, many, many times. You might take it to the executive team and they say, I don't really like this, or this isn't really working for me, go back and get some more data to prove to me that this is going to work. And then at the end of it, if the CEO and the executive team think it's a good idea, you can get funded to build it. You can go hire a 2-pizza team and go start building it and build it progressively and iterate. We try not to start too big with things. We start usually with the very initial version, small, and iterate and try to make it bigger and bigger. So I think probably the most interesting and unique part of Amazon in terms of product management is this PRFAQ process. Other companies I've worked at, you write a lot of detailed specifications and MRDs and PRDs, and that's what the team uses to build it. So what do we do, in working backwards? And the PRFAQ is really, particularly the PR, is to clarify our thinking around these questions. Who's the customer? What's the problem or opportunity we're trying to solve? Is the most important benefit to the customer clear? How do you know what customers need or want? So how did you come up with your conclusions? What's the data you have? And what does the experience look like? So often, and we'll have an appendix that has some maybe wireframes or sketches, could be just hand-drawn, that show kind of roughly how it's going to look as a product. These are typically tech products. So I mentioned some of this already. It's usually reviewed, depending on the size of what it is, it's reviewed maybe by your divisional general manager. Ultimately, for my group, for AWS, it's approved by the AWS CEO. And it's another really cool thing about Amazon is as a product manager, you get to be in meetings with the CEO, and we have meetings to review PRFAQs as well as a couple other documents I'll talk about in a minute. A lot of things are very independent. We don't need a lot of approval. It's not very hierarchical. But for PRFAQs, for pricing, and for naming, those are 3 things that we do as product managers that actually go to Andy, who's our CEO. He reports to Jeff. Go to him. We have a meeting with him. He reads it and tells us whether he likes it or not, basically. A little bit stressful, but it's a really good experience, and you can really benefit from learning from how he thinks. The interesting thing is there's not a lot of financial analysis at this stage. It's really based on, do we think that there's a need? Do we think there's an opportunity? And do we think we have the ability to address it? Do we have the technology and the understanding of how to build it? The financial part of it actually comes later, which is actually, I think, a little unique as well. As I mentioned, the dev team will use this to build the product, the development team. And development process is up to really every team. So again, not very hierarchical in Amazon, not very, there's not a lot of dictated process for things, for example, how the product is developed. In software development, there's different methodologies. There's agile methods, so like Scrum and Kanban are 2 agile methods. Waterfall is a more traditional product development method. So any team can really just pick what works best for them and what works best for the product that they're developing. That's not really dictated. As the product's being developed, one of the next steps is figuring out the pricing. So product managers in Amazon, we own the pricing for new and existing products. So if there's an existing product, sometimes we're going to update the price. Again, when we're doing pricing, we do a narrative. So again, it's a 6-page memo, 6-page doc. And it contains a few things. So first thing is customers. We're customer obsessed, so we ask customers about prices. So I did a pricing recently, just last summer. We were releasing a new product, and I went and talked to customers. I had meetings with them, either over the web or face to face. We asked them, "What do you think about this price? Would you pay it? Would you not pay it? Do you think it's too much?" And people are sometimes surprised by that because they think, well, customers are just going to say, "I want it cheap or free." But customers, when we talk to them, they're very pragmatic about it. They understand that we're in it to make money. We're in it it's a business where we need to cover our costs at least. And they really think about what the value is. So it really helps us test what the value of the product is to the customer. So we talk to them to test price points, also pricing models. So in Amazon Web Services, most things are on a pay-as-you-go basis. So our customers sign up and they just pay for what they use. But we often look at other pricing models, such as charging in advance and paying monthly or things like that. So we test those with people. How would they like to pay? Do they want to pay as OpEx or CapEx, for example? Part of pricing is the cost model and net margins. So we have to look at the product we're building. How much is it going to cost us to deliver that product? how many servers do we need to run it on, or how much infrastructure is it going to take to use the service, to run the service. So we do that, and we look at the net margin, we look at the profitability, we look at competitors and substitutes. So how much do our competitors charge, if competitors exist? Sometimes it's something new and there's no competitors yet, so we look at what we'd call substitutes. So an example of a substitute might be Kindle versus books. So when Kindle came out, maybe there was no e-readers, maybe there was, I can't remember, but if there wasn't, you would compare it against a traditional book. Price elasticity, everyone knows what that is. Econ, one of those econ courses, 101 or 102 or something. So we do actually look at price elasticity, we look at if we can get it. Sometimes hard to get the data, but I was looking at a pricing for an existing product recently, and I had the benefit of a lot of data to look at. I could look at, we did a price drop in 2013. I could look at what was the impact of that price drop on usage, on adoption, and so we can measure elasticity. So we can see, okay, if we drop the price or raise the price, what's the extra revenue or lower revenue we're going to get from that. Forecast, 3 to 5 year P&L. So depending what you're doing, you're going to look at your P&L out 3 to 5 years. You're going to look at the forecast, how much revenue, how much profit are you going to be making in your sort of period of time that you're looking at. And then we provide options and recommendations. So typically in a pricing doc, we'll suggest 2 or 3 or 4 options. We make a recommendation. At the end of the day, the CEO might say, I don't like that, and I like this option. So we present different options, and we present a lot of data to justify what we think. The third thing we do that, again, goes for executive review is naming. So what's the product name? This one's always very interesting, very hard to do this scientifically. So we do a lot of research here. We try to figure out names that are appealing to people. We do some market research. A big part of the naming document, though, is just the messaging and positioning for the product, and that's going to be used for launch. So in our naming document, we talk about what are the key benefits that we want to convey to people. That often helps drive what the name of the product's going to be. Positioning, so how are we positioning the product relative to our competitors or to other solutions out there? Differentiation, how are we different than what's out there today? And we provide, again, a selection of naming choices and a recommendation. Again, another narrative, another 6-page memo. So these take a lot of actually time to develop these, especially for larger products. And we have a meeting with the CEO. We usually have to go down to Seattle for this, and he approves the name. Launch, you talked about launch today, so product management is also the owner for launch. And I'm kind of going through these in sequence as well. So as you're developing a product, you typically approach things in this order. So PRFAQ, you're developing the product, then pricing, naming, and then ultimately launch. So as product managers, we own the launch. This isn't the same at every company. Often companies have someone called a product marketing manager that owns the launch. We do have that role. They kind of work with us on the launch, but we kind of are the quarterback, if you will, for the whole launch. We work with the marketing team that includes the product marketing manager. They often help write content or copy that goes on the website or their materials. Social media team, we're pretty active, AWS and Amazon on all social media channels, and we use social media to launch products. The web team as well. We often or always have a presence on the web for our products. We work with tech writers, documentation. We work with engineering, of course, who are building the product, and our products are in AWS particularly, they're all live hosted web products. So part of the launch is actually just making the product live on the internet. So that's where we work with their engineering on that. We divide our launches into tier 1, 2, or 3. Tier 1 is really kind of the largest, anything that's a brand new product, big, impactful. We have an annual conference called reInvent. So you're talking about launch windows. That's a big launch window for us. I don't remember how many products we launched at reInvent this year. It was probably around 70 or 80. But just in terms of pace, last year, AWS alone, this is just a part of Amazon, we launched 700 features and services in 2016. So these launches are happening all the time. And part of what customers love about AWS, about Amazon, is just the pace of innovation, how quickly we come out with things. So a tier 1 is often something we're going to launch at reInvent. Tier 2s, tier 3s are things that we might be launching any time of the year. Other launch windows we think about, for Amazon retail in particular, we're thinking about the US Thanksgiving and Christmas season. So big launch window for the retail part of the company is just prior to that. In AWS, we're not as concerned about that. We're more concerned about, we're an enterprise company, so we're concerned about events in the enterprise space. We would look at launching around big trade shows, big conferences. We do summits around the world in cities such as London and Singapore and places like that. So we might want to launch around a particular summit event. Okay, so after we've launched, what do? We need to monitor the product. We need to understand how is it doing in the market. So for all the services in Amazon Web Services, all the products, we have what's called a weekly business review, or WBR. Product managers are responsible for this. We have metrics that we monitor. So for one of the products I manage, there's 514 metrics every week that get generated. Okay, so it's a huge spreadsheet, basically. PDF actually is what we ultimately create that documents our weekly metrics. Usage, revenue, adoption, broken down by geography and region, sliced and diced in many different ways, week-on-week growth, year-on-year growth, multitude of things. Why do we do that? So one of the Amazon leadership principles I didn't mention before, dive deep. So we always try to and strive to really dive deep into everything we do and really deeply understand our business as well as our products, as well as our customers. It applies to everything. This is part of diving deep. We really need to understand how the business is doing, what changes might be coming that might be impacting things, why things are happening. That really helps us tune the product as we go forward. It helps us understand if the product's meeting the thoughts that we had initially when we created the PR FAQ. When we created that vision, is it meeting the vision? Is it falling behind? Is it doing better than we thought? And so this is a really important aspect of the business. We do a one-page narrative every week. It's a one-page document, gets reviewed actually by the CEO. He doesn't do every product every week, but we meet with him every week and he might review your product at any given week. It's usually scheduled, it's usually every 10 or 12 weeks, it's your turn. And he's going to go deeply, the CEO of the company is going to go deeply into your particular product and ask you questions and grill you on your product. So you better know what's going on. So it's a one-page narrative. It covers things like risks, issues, and challenges as well. So any risks you see to the business, maybe a competitor launched something that you need to think about, or maybe you're having a challenge with quality of something. That could be something you really want to cover and draw attention to. So the PMs review that with the CEO and the executive team every week, and it's a really important part of the product, and again, something I found very unique to Amazon. Most companies I've been at, we look at things monthly, quarterly, we hold reviews, but just to do this at a weekly pace, it's pretty intensive actually. So that's kind of the main things. On to a little bit more of the boring stuff. Tools, I think Andrew asked to cover this. So we don't use anything particularly exciting in terms of tools. We use Office, not so much PowerPoint, but we use Word a lot. We use Outlook, we use Excel a lot. Probably one of the more interesting things is we have something called a data warehouse. So Amazon Web Services has a product that is a data warehouse product called Redshift. And we store tons of data in there, terabytes, petabytes of data about our products. All of our products are actually instrumented to pump data into this data warehouse. So when I mentioned those metrics and looking at that data, we pull it out of the data warehouse. So we can actually analyze everything you can imagine about how products are doing, what customers are doing. We can find individual customers and accounts. We can find out what those customers are doing and how much they're using of our products. A ton of information. So one of the unique things is, does anyone know what SQL is? It's a language for querying databases. It's a way to select and query data out of a database. So in most companies, you would expect that there's a team that does that for you. Not in Amazon, we do it ourselves. We actually write our own code to query the data warehouse and find the data. The power of it, though, is it's great because you don't have to wait for somebody else. If you have a question and you're thinking, I really like to know something about my product or about the business, you can just go into the data warehouse, write your own query, and find what you need. So that's, I think, one of the unique things. The rest of the things are, pretty vanilla, kind of boring, typical tools, so I won't really cover them too much. I think we covered pricing already. I won't talk more about that. Promotion, we do use the naming document, as I mentioned, to develop branding, advertising, lead gen, sales support, and those things. So as just a conclusion, I think I've done product management for many years. I found Amazon to be a really interesting place to do product management. I found it's very unique compared to most technology companies. There are some similarities, but I think the aspect of working backwards and really being customer obsessed and really trying to drive things from the customer's needs and point of view is really one of the most unique aspects of it. I think the other unique aspect is really how much we dive deep into describing, what the customers need and trying to define really remarkable products that customers are going to love, and that we spend a lot of time iterating on these documents and reviewing them and then actually getting approval. And then the cool thing is once you've got a great idea and people think it's good, that it's funded and you can go build a team and start building it. And it's really powerful. I think it's one of the reasons Amazon's been very successful and is very innovative and is always coming out with new crazy things that people are surprised that we're doing. Yeah, that's it. Any questions? As the product manager writing it, it's up to you to get that data. So we do have a customer research team. They do surveys. They do some analysis. It tends to be higher level stuff. So we look, for example, quarterly. We're looking at things like customer satisfaction, or we're looking at customer perceptions of our brand versus other brands and things like that. So we might use some of that data, but typically at this level where you're really looking at one product, they wouldn't have that kind of research, and you're trying to do kind of new research. So we would do that. So actually one of the tools we use, it's not on here, but we use a survey tool called Qualtrics to do surveys. We do those ourselves to do research. The other way we do research is just by buying market reports that others have done. But probably the most important thing is just talking to actual customers, like getting on the phone, going to visit them. We bring customers to Amazon as well, and we're just talking to them and understanding really deeply what they do, what their challenges are, what their needs are, and really just diving into that and developing your own hypothesis and research from that. So often when we're writing these documents, we're actually working pretty closely with our engineering counterparts, and they contribute to the document as well. So I don't want to give the impression that only we write it and we're sitting in a little bubble by ourselves writing this. So we're actually collaborating with them. So as we're progressing and writing it, we're probably doing some prototyping and some testing and some viability type of things to figure it out. We often don't know everything right up front, and after we've written it, we might find out like some aspect of it wasn't viable. So then we might go back and rethink things. So yeah, you kind of assume ideal conditions, but you're not going to write something for something that's impossible to do. So you need to be able to work closely with developers, with engineers, to figure that part out. Because if you create for example, a perpetual motion machine and you write up your FAQ and it's not possible to build, there's not going to be a lot of business value there. So in most companies, when you're doing a product proposal, the financial side's pretty important, and you think about that aspect. And we do think about that later, and we make sure we can get it funded and all those things. But when you're writing the PR and FAQ, it's really just focused on the product itself. Is it something that's going to solve a need? And if it's going to solve a need, and if it's going to do it in a unique way, we believe that we can figure out the financial side of it to make it viable. So for a lot of the things I've worked on in AWS, we go to our existing customer base. So because AWS is really a platform, and someone like Netflix, for example, is on that platform, and we might have an idea that would be useful for Netflix, so we could go talk to them about it. So we're often talking to existing customers. There's definitely times where we're talking to people that aren't our customers as well. In that case, it does get trickier, but surveys is a good way to find customers that might be interested. Talking to the sales organization as well. So you might talk to the sales team and say, hey, this is something we're thinking about. Do you have any customers that might be interested in something like this? And they might have an idea around that. So that's typically how we do it, yeah. So AWS is a different business within Amazon, and we have our own CEO, as I mentioned, Andy Jassy, and he reports to Jeff. So it is really like a company within the company, but we share a lot of things too. So a lot of the tools we use, the website, like everything we use internally is shared. Our buildings and everything are shared. So I work in downtown here. We've got an office in Telus Garden, and in that building we've got people from all parts of Amazon. We've got people from Twitch, from Prime, from the retail website, from transportation, the guys that figure out where the trucks need to go and those kind of things. So, it's a mixture in terms of the infrastructure, but in terms of the business itself, it is kind of, I wouldn't use the word siloed, but it is separate. They are also, for my products and for AWS, they're one of our biggest customers. So Amazon Retail runs on AWS, so uses a lot of AWS services. And so we also treat them like a customer. So one of the customers we talk to when we're developing these ideas is internal customers as well. And that's really how, that's really kind of how AWS started, because Amazon was building this massive IT infrastructure and realized, we need to do a lot of these things that other people need as well. And also Amazon had excess kind of infrastructure because they needed to build it to handle the peak at kind of Thanksgiving and Christmas retail time. What about the rest of the year? And the original idea around AWS was that capacity could be essentially sold as a service to other companies, and that's really how AWS started. But it is, we are a supplier essentially to the retail site, and so we treat them like a customer. Yeah. It is a bit intuitive, but there's certain things about it that require some experiencing it and understanding it. There are classes too, so they do working backwards courses. They're usually in Seattle, which is our headquarters, so people can travel down and attend them. There's a lot of information on the web. The wiki is one of the things mentioned up there. So Amazon has an extensive, does everyone know what a wiki is? It's like Wikipedia basically, but internally. So a lot of our documentation or internal information is on this wiki, and you can search and find things about anything almost. So for example, if I wanted to find out, hey, what was the PR FAQ for that Amazon retail store, I could probably find it on this website, which is kind of cool. It exposes you to a ton of information. But on the wiki as well, there's resources for learning about working backwards, examples of other people's working backwards that you can draw from. And a lot of learning is just from other people doing it. So we help each other learn the process. But yeah, it's actually fairly intuitive. I kind of agree with you, and I think that's one of the reasons it works well. You're thinking of it from, well, what's the customer going to read? The FAQ is really, what questions might a customer have? So there's some obvious ones they're going to ask that are usually in every FAQ, like how much does it cost? How do I sign up for it? Those kinds of questions. But it really forces you to think about it from a customer viewpoint. So. It can be either or. So teams that are actively working on a product, they're continually developing new features and new capabilities for that product. So we'll have a roadmap, let's say for the next year, for 2017. We might have, let's say, 4 or 5 new features we're going to introduce this year on a product. And so we're going to write those PR FAQs, and then that same development team is going to build those. If it's something completely new, so for example, last year I wrote one that went up to the CEO and actually got approved, and we started hiring a team at the end of last year. They're still rolling in. Actually, the manager for the team is going to start next month, and we're going to build it this year, and it's going to be a completely new team. Some people moved from other teams, so another thing that's really encouraged in Amazon is changing teams. So people might work on a team, say, for a year, and then they might decide, actually, I'm interested in working on this other team. And it could actually be, you were asking about the silo, people move back and forth too. So someone that was working in AWS might say, I'm really interested in working in Amazon Prime. So they might go work on a Prime team for a while, and then maybe they'll go back. So sometimes when we build a new team, it can be drawing from other parts of the company. Sometimes we hire entirely new people to work on it.
Let's say you get a PR FAQ approved and things start to ramp up, and then you roll into doing the pricing document. Can the product get killed?
I'm sure it does. I haven't seen it happen, but I'm sure it could happen. Yeah.
Which implicitly suggests that as the product manager, you would go through a lot of the stuff that ends up in the pricing document in your mind when you're writing the PR FAQ.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're thinking through what demand might look like, whether the product is feasible, whether you could make money. Although these aren't stated in the PR FAQ, you're thinking about the fact that you have to deliver these.
Right. That's
documents.
True. Sometimes in the PRFAQ we might provide sort of a hint or a guideline around pricing, what we're thinking. Like we might say something like, we think this will cost between $5 to $10 to be further fleshed out in the pricing document. But we might kind of give at least some guideline around that, so when people are reading it, they can kind of get an idea in their mind about pricing.
And I guess from doing FAQs of my own in the past, you typically include pricing in your FAQ anyway.
We do, yeah.
Right. So
it's usually one of the questions that get answered. In the eventual, because I think what you're talking about, which I didn't mention, is often in AWS when we launch the product, the FAQ actually appears on the website. So it's probably changed from the original one. And that's another important aspect in kind of what you're talking about is none of these things are really kind of set in stone. So we know that probably what we wrote a year ago is going to be different a year later when we launch it, because we learn new information, things change, the market changes. So we're not always bound to exactly what we wrote, but we try to keep the vision intact. We try to be rigid on vision and flexible on details. Maybe that's the way to think about it.
And my other question is, AWS has hundreds and hundreds of products, probably thousands of SKUs in actual fact. How does your product get selected for a CEO drill down at the WBRs? Is it a random selection process?
So actually AWS doesn't have that many products. We have about, I don't know what the number is now, we have less than 100 major products or services, or there's actually less than 100. But there's just a rotation actually. So there's it's fixed but somewhat flexible. So for example, there's 2 products I'm currently managing that are in that process, and they come up about once a quarter, typically.
Right.
Yeah.
But you could be asked at any moment?
Theoretically, yeah, you could be. Yeah. So I mean, if there's something, maybe there's an issue or something that's happening with a product, maybe a big customer had an issue and the CEO wants to know what's going on. Right. So he might say, okay, I want to dive into this product this week. So yeah, that does happen. Yeah.
Great. Do we have any other questions for Trevor? Yeah.
Wow, that's a really good question. Do I have to pick one? And the reason I say is they're both really important. But I've always believed, and this is just not just an Amazon thing, I've just believed that the execution is actually the most important part. Ideas are actually easy to come by. Lots of people have good ideas. Where companies often fall down is on the execution. And it's one thing, and we didn't talk about a lot here, but Amazon's really good at executing and building and running things. And I honestly think that's where the company excels. The idea part is really good, and I think the process they've created around PRFAQs is really cool and helps a lot. But nothing matters if you can't execute and build it and make it successful. And that's not just the engineering piece as well. That's the marketing side. That's the support and DevOps, what we call DevOps, which is operating the service, is extremely important in something like this. So the execution, if I have to pick one, I'll say execution.
Very good.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Andrew.
I'd like to thank Trevor.